Live from ZTN Studios in Harare, Zimbabwe's capital. Hello and welcome to The Chase. I'm Owen Kaura. Now, this Peace and Social Cohesion Dialogue series is brought to you by ZTN in partnership with Heal Zimbabwe Trust. This is the second edition of this dialogue series. Now, in studio, we have the National Peace and Reconciliation Commissioner spokesperson, Commissioner Obet Gutu. Welcome, Commissioner. Great. And from the Zimbabwe Gender Commission, we have Commissioner Margaret Mukahanana Sangarwe, who is the Commission's chairperson. Good evening, Commissioner.
Good evening. Thank you. Great.
Now, from the political parties, we have ZANU-PF Director of Information and Publicity, Tafadzo Mugwadi. Welcome, Tafadzo.
Thank you very much, Maswere.
Great. And from the MDC Alliance, we have Jacob Mafume. Welcome, Jacob.
Thank you.
Great. Now, this is just a reminder that this is a dialogue series which only seeks to establish the extent of polarization within our society and the remedies. Now, from the onset, let me be clear that we'll stick to the subject matter in efforts to foster peace and cohesion among Zimbabweans. Our values, as usual, are dignity, dialogue, and debate. Now, panelists should respond with respect and within the time limits set. And I'm going to start with the non-political actors in the room from a very simple place, and I'll start with you, Obet. What is polarization?
Polarization, Owen, it's sometimes you can actually sometimes link it with intolerance. There's debate to say which is first between intolerance and polarization. I would leave that debate maybe for another day. But I think polarization, you can easily define it as a lack of tolerance for different views or perspectives. And to say perhaps if somebody sees issues or an issue from one perspective and you see it from a different perspective, and the two of you or one of you cannot respect or appreciate the different perspective, that invariably leads to polarization, which unfortunately becomes very sad, because polarization is this effect now of being very toxic. And once there is polarization, more often than not, it feeds into toxicity, be it in, it's not only in politics, there can also be toxicity even in the churches, even in business, even in sport. You know, you find supporters of different teams. There may be soccer teams or basketball teams or cricket teams. If they are polarized, they can become so divided. Sometimes it can even lead to violence, as in physical violence. So I would like to believe that as Zimbabweans, and we as the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, we really are one of our main functions. If you look at our functions as captured in Section 252 of the Supreme Law of the Land, is just to make sure that we live in peace and harmony, that we build peace. We are peace builders, so we will try to obviously work on issues like polarization and try to depolarize and perhaps make people live peacefully. Once we live in peace, we are happy or happier.
We will definitely interrogate some of the issues that you've already raised in your introduction there, but I'll come to you, Margaret, from the Zimbabwe Gender Commission. In terms of political polarization, from a gender perspective, where are we as Zimbabweans?
As Zimbabweans, we find that our political culture is based on our societal culture of patriarchy, where male supremacy is promoted as opposed to women. And we find that women become marginalized. And apart from political intolerance, there's also the issue of gender, where women are marginalized and they don't contribute. So there's no inclusivity. And this actually creates a situation where there's also polarization between men and women, apart from the partisan polarization. So we are saying once the polarization of, in terms of politics, actually it exacerbates gender inequalities, and it exacerbates intolerance. So, and also when the women try to claim their place in society, then you find that we actually create some conflict. So I find that the culture of polarization is based on patriarchy, and this is where the problem is in terms of actually women participating effectively in society and in the development of their country.
You bring in a very valid points there, and one word that I caught is patriarchy. And like I said to Orbit later in his introduction, we will interrogate those issues further. But let me just come to the political parties themselves. We've got ZANU-PF, which is the ruling party here. Now, from you, from your standing, Tafadzwa, is there polarization in political parties? Maybe we'll start from there, a very simple place.
Thank you very much. I think in terms of addressing that question, if you look behind, if you look back actually, it will be unfortunate if I don't acknowledge that indeed we had political polarization in this country. And that political polarization reached its zenith in between 2000 and 2010 with serious political polarization then. And that is why during that period, political relations were marred with violence between and among political parties, internal violence within political parties themselves, and then intra-party violence, even civil society also, violence inside there, a lot of instances. Of course, you would agree with me that after that, I'm sure you know that polarization used to rear its ugly head during times of elections. And a lot of violence was taking place. We need to acknowledge that, and I'm sure we from ZANU-PF, when the president was inaugurated in 2017 at the first stage of his inauguration after getting into power, he acknowledged that, and that is why President Mnangagwa said we need to put politics behind and allow the economy to take center stage so that we move to productivity. The idea was that there are a lot of political differences in this country, and if we allow those to occupy the front seat, there will be continuous polarization between and among political parties. But fast forward to 2017 and the situation thereafter, you can agree with me that, you know, ZANU-PF as the ruling party through our government, which is the implementing organ of the party, has tried all its best through the statesmanship of our president to ensure that we create conducive platforms, dialogue platforms for people to exchange views, cross-pollinate on ideas, share grievances where they do have, and that platform is the Polad. The idea behind all that was to ensure that people come together.
Just hang on, Tafadzo. We will talk about that later on, but we also need to give Jacob a chance to have a say as well. So Jacob from the MDC Alliance, he has acknowledged that there is indeed political polarization. But from the MDC Alliance, do you agree? And if you agree, what are the causes of political polarization, in your opinion?
Yes, most definitely there is political polarization. And it comes from a culture of not basically understanding multi-party democratism or understanding that there's strength in diversity and that there can be unity in diversity. We have a unipolar, my way or the highway approach from the ruling party, as he said, or ruling, sorry. So what then happens is that, as he explained earlier, that there were violence and there was impunity. Those people who were affected by the violence have not been compensated. There have not been justice in certain instances. There's been justice somewhere, but it hasn't been there. There is a hangover of the one-party state. There is a hangover of laws that exclude media, laws, access to media. For example, you have not seen me on certain media platforms.
But you are here.
Well, ZTN probably, but I have not been on ZBC, except when I'm being scandalous. The only time I appeared on ZBC was when I was being taken to jail. But if I do something good, like providing water to the Senator or Commissioner Obet Gudu, I will not come.
And these are the issues that we want to interrogate.
Those are the
this
causes.
Evening. Yes. Now, I'll just to come to you, Obet, from the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission. Already, you've heard what the political parties have to say, and there is no doubt, indeed, there is a political polarization. Now, how does this affect the general citizenry?
It actually affects the general citizen in a very big way and in a bad way. Because once there is polarization, particularly, I would just call it polarization, because political polarization, when you look at it critically, you find that it's not only confined to political polarization, it cuts across various facets of life. To say, if I'm politically polarized against my sister here, or my brother there, or my brother there, sometimes it even goes beyond political polarization. I become even socially polarized. If we go to the same church, I won't even want to sit next to him or to her. If we are supporting the same team, football team, I would change my team because he's supporting the same team. So I think it's affecting our society in a very negative way, in the sense that we as Zimbabweans should learn to appreciate that we don't necessarily have to support the same political party or have the same political views in order for us to be united. To say we can actually look at Zimbabwe in a development mode without necessarily being homogeneous in our belief system. I don't want to call it a political belief system because it will be confining it, I think, to too narrow a basis. I'll just call it a belief system. Our political belief system, our religious belief system, our cultural belief system, to say, look, let's just appreciate that we are born differently. That's why some are tall, some are short, some are light in complexion for us black people, some are dark, but we are all human beings. We are made by the same God, by the same Creator. So I'm sure if we, like what we do in the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, to say we want a peaceful Zimbabwe, not for this generation, not for yesterday's generation, not for tomorrow's generation, but for all generations. It has to be timeless. So I believe that we really have to work on issues of polarization and to depolarize, not only politically, but depolarize our societies beyond just the political confinement.
So it goes beyond the political confinement.
Absolutely.
And then that brings in the Zimbabwe Gender Commission now. Coming to you, Margaret. In terms of depolarization, the face of depolarization, we're looking at women, we're looking at children, we're looking at men. How is this affecting these constituencies?
In fact, polarization is very toxic. It affects both men and women. In fact, it prevents both men and women, boys and girls, from realizing their rights as expounded in our Constitution, section 67 of our Constitution. Because where there's polarization, there's bound to be conflict, there's bound to be violence. And when we did the recent gender audit of main political parties, we realized that one of the main reasons why women are not featuring a lot in terms of political participation is because of violence, it's because of conflict. And polarization is behind most of the conflict that we are encountering. So we need to depolarize so that everyone can actually be able to contribute to the, and we focus on development instead of focusing on politics and trying to prove a point. So what I'm saying is that we need to depolarize so that men and women, everyone in Zimbabwe, every nation, citizen, will be able to realize their potential, will be able to get opportunities. So it is very critical, because without that, you find we spend more time and resources on conflict management, on conflict resolution, and destructive tendencies which are not really helpful for the development of the country.
It's interesting that you bring in those points there, but I'd like to come to you, Tafadzwa, as ZANU-PF. Earlier, you had hinted on Polad, the political actors dialogue. Do you think it is effective?
Thank you very much. I think let me just pick up from where you ended me abruptly. What I wanted to say, which you then probably misinterpreted me, I didn't say there's polarization in this country. I acknowledge that there was polarization before. It was so much. And I must characterize the polarization probably slightly differing from from my colleagues here. Polarization in Zimbabwe is now a choice. It is an individual choice or an organizational choice that you can choose to be polarized yourselves. That is, when you are tolerated and you refuse to be tolerated, in this case, you'll be choosing to be polarized. When you refuse to be tolerated, or if you refuse tolerance, and in the process you also refuse to tolerate others, you are polarizing yourself. So it is not everyone that is polarized in Zimbabwe. Some organizations choose to, some don't. So it is in this context that I wanted to say that if you compare the situation, I think comparative politics is a good teacher in this context. If you take the situation before 2017, and the situation after 2017, you can acknowledge very well that Zimbabweans more and more are coming closer to each other. It is because of the deliberate policies and institutions that have been put by the ZANU-PF government, which involve colleagues from these ones. They are part of government, where they are heading institutions, commissions that are responsible for ensuring that we deal with social, political, religious, all forms of tolerization, where they are still remaining in pockets. But in terms of politics, that's why I'm coming to Polad in terms of its effectiveness. I'm sure there is no modicum of doubt that Polad is effective, given the number of political parties that have come to take part in this dialogue platform. And I must hasten to point out that you can't say, I'm sure you know what has been going pervasive in the political market there, is that Polad is ineffective because some individual player is not there. I don't want to talk about the player because they make their choice. I must tell you, we from ZANU-PF, and I'm sure our government, does not lose sleep over the refusal of an individual to come and join a table of brotherhood. And that should not mean that we are polarized. We must acknowledge the individual's right not to become part of, without then using his refusal as a characterization of the political system in this country. In this case, those that have come have agreed not to join ZANU-PF, and ZANU-PF has not agreed to join with them. It has agreed to work with them. This is a radical departure from the past. In the process, acknowledging multipartyism as a system, a thriving system in a democracy. That's what we're doing. And I'm sure if you look at the deliberations coming from Polad, you can tell me very well that indeed Zimbabweans as a result are beginning to come together, speaking from the same thinking cap, speaking with the same mind about fundamental national questions that speak to national interest. On the question of sanctions, people in Polad, they are agreed. Sanctions need to go. These are some of the issues that were polarizing this nation. On violence, they agreed. Violence needs to be extricated completely from our system, and the violent culture must be dealt with completely. They agreed. Corruption needs to be tackled from all forms of our system, whether in municipalities where Jacob Mafume is a player there. I'm not accusing of corruption, I'm acknowledging you are the mayor of Harare, where there are players there at government level, in the civil society, including Wana Hill, Zimbabwe, where there are players. Corruption needs to be dealt with as a culture at all levels. They are speaking fundamentally with the same voice. There is only probably one political party that has made a choice not to be part of that voice, that collective national voice. And I must reiterate, wherever they are, that's their right not to become. The political reasons for that, that's something else, but we acknowledge the right not to become part of, and please enjoy outside, where of course we know it is very cold outside.
And that naturally brings you in, Jacob, your take in terms of Polad, in terms of social cohesion, nation building. This is a healing process. Your take on Polad.
Well, when you engage with someone whom you disagree with. When you try to talk, you talk with someone whom you have had a dispute with. You cannot create a platform of yes people or yes organization, or organizations that will probably be effectively be given vehicles. We have seen the gratitude. I saw one of the professors who taught me, very good professor. I was surprised to see him clapping for a twin cab. You know, he's a professor at the University of Zimbabwe. You know, and he was so grateful to have received a car, which, you know, as a lawyer, you really cannot be grateful to receive a car. But that is a story for another day.
Indeed, because we are focusing here on polarization.
On the polarization.
Yes, political
so
polarization.
When you talk, you have to talk with people whom you disagree with. We have had a fundamental disagreement on a number of issues with a particular political party seated on my left. And we have disagreed on the conduct of elections, we have disagreed on the conduct of the media, we have disagreed on the conduct of the economy, we have disagreed on the conduct of many issues. And what we have put together through our president, Advocate Nelson Chamisa, was a platform and a call for dialogue, and put a roadmap for that dialogue to be able to deal with the issues that he talks about: international re-engagement, restoration of human rights, dealing with violence, and looking at issues of impunity. How do you deal with the victims of past misdeeds, past violence? The violence he's talking about is not violence that is tautologous. People died. People were injured. properties was lost. A lot of things were done, and that's why the National Healing Commission was put in place to put in a framework for compensation, a framework for laws to be able to deal with that. Polad is unable to deal with that because it is a conglomeration of those that agree. It is not a conglomeration of those that are diverse and are able to discuss. The elementary issue of dealing with agreements is to talk with the person whom you disagree with.
I'll just stay with the political parties for now because you're raising important issues, but I'll come to you, Tafadzwa. In your opinion, what should be the ideal relationship between a ruling party and the opposition?
Thank you very much. I think, like I said, polarization is a choice that individuals make. We are gathered here, myself as a representative of the ruling party, and I'm sure my friend here comes from a different party, which is not the party that is led by the professor is referring to, but he has already made a sermon on the professor, attacking him, but he is not there. It is a choice that he has made to be polarized against the professor in this party. I don't know what their party loses on the conduct of that particular professor and their political party. As long as we feel that whenever we are gathered, we should have comments or we should have sentiments or views or opinionated positions about certain individuals which are negative, that is polarization. And that is why I said it is a choice. When you get on a platform and the next thing you feel is to generate language that attacks other political parties for who they are, you're not being tolerant. Okay. And let me say, the MDC, Jacob, which is your party, I would probably want to know on what basis would you have wanted to design a roadmap to dialogue. You lost the elections. Dialogue was an extension of the president's statesmanship and generosity to say, comrades, come you let us sit together, reason together, and build our nation together as one. And then you say, no, the strategy that the winner, who is generous in this case, and the winner who is inviting you to a dialogue to say, let's sit down, that generosity for you is nothing. And that you say, because we had disagreements over the elections, which disagreements you took through the legal process and you lost dismally on the basis of lack of what are now commonly known as V11 forms. Then you say the strategy that is used as the winner is not what you wanted. I would have wanted to say not wanted is who in this case. I'm sure that was a choice to remain polarized, and that's theirs. Let me say, address the question that you have said in terms of what should be the nature of relations between political parties, the ruling party and the opposition party. You know, like I always say, I'm a student of comparative politics, and I like it so much. I've watched Julius Malema's conduct. I've watched the South African opposition's conduct with the ANC. And I must tell you that when COVID-19 knocked its doors on South African border, homeland, the EFF president, who is young enough than other politicians that we do have here, had the guts to say, no, I'll visit the president to share with him my strategy of dealing with this pandemic. And they met with President Ramaphosa, designed a roadmap to deal with the virus, and they worked together in unison. I've seen when they disagree, and even when they were saying Zuma bring back the money when they were attacking presidents, they would say President Zuma. They would not just say Zuma. You go to the British system where my colleagues, fans so much, and I'm sure, of course, it is now common cause, they are born from there. They acknowledge the British Prime Minister as Prime Minister Boris Johnson, as Prime Minister David Cameron, as Prime Minister Gordon Brown, as Prime Minister Tony Blair. They will not say Tony Blair. It is the relationship is what is called in summary loyal opposition. The concept which I just wanted to share briefly in 10 seconds. Yes. It is called loyal opposition and a responsible ruling party. A loyal opposition acknowledges defeat where it has been defeated, works on its weaknesses to win and acknowledge the winner, not to have a series of elections where they always disagree because elections should be won by them. The ruling party must also treat the opposition.
We'll definitely come back to you, and Jacob will definitely come back to you, but he has raised a point where he said some countries seem to be unified. But I want Orbit to answer this because I think it speaks to Orbit here. Some countries seem to be unified. Why is that so? Why can't we as Zimbabweans be unified? Like he is saying, he gave an example of South Africa. Why can't we do the same? Yes, you'll be able to respond, but I just want him to come in first, and I'll let you respond.
Oh, and speaking for the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, this is why you find that our constitutional mandate is very clear. one of the key functions of the NPRC is to foster peace and reconciliation. When you look at peace and reconciliation, it's especially, I'll put the emphasis on peace, to say, as Zimbabweans, the NPRC is there as a constitutional body, one of the 5 independent commissions, Chapter 12 commissions, to foster the culture of human rights. And human rights, by their very nature, they entail tolerance, they entail peace. I don't think we can talk of human rights without talking about peace. I think they are like inseparable Siamese twins. So as the NPRC, we are simply saying we would like to encourage not only political players, but all Zimbabweans, because I think some Zimbabweans, or most Zimbabweans, are not even active political players. But we say peace should actually involve all of us. Let's go back to, this famous phrase that was coined by, one of our visionary, nationalists, the late Vice President, Honorable John Ngomo, to say peace begins with me. Peace begins with you, and then peace begins with all of us. So when you look at that as the NPRC, we are saying everyone is a player in peace building, not only the politicians. So the issue of saying what should we do maybe as the NPRC to assist in fostering that culture of peace, we're actually doing that right now. All the 9 commissioners, we have been on a provincial courtesy call, interfacing campaigns to meet key stakeholders. We actually, me in my capacity as the commissioner assigned to Harare Metropolitan Province, we paid a courtesy call on the mayor of the city. We paid a courtesy call on the various political players, political parties. We actually also paid courtesy calls on other key stakeholders, religious leaders, the Zimbabwean Christian Council, the Islamic Society. We even had a courtesy call on, the Zimbabwe Youth Council and NGOs. Why we are doing that is to say, let's look at key stakeholders. Political parties are not the only key stakeholder. They are a key stakeholder amongst other key stakeholders. So that's our role.
But I still feel you haven't answered the question. What really divides us as Zimbabweans? But that's for another time.
Yeah, maybe I'll come back to that.
You'll come back to that one as well. Margaret, I'll come to you as well. But of course, Jacob, you wanted to respond. In terms of your ideal situation, relationship between the opposition and the ruling party, what is your ideal situation?
Well, the ideal situation is obviously in a multi-party democracy. Diversity is respected. Equal access to opportunity, equal access to the media, equal access to the courts, human rights being respected, equal access to state resources, the ability to be able to voice, running away from the idea that the might is right. We need to move to a society where ideas battle, where ideas are the things that drive society, not force or violence or exclusionary politics. So we need an environment that is enabling, an environment that says when somebody is violated, there is a tendency of an abuser to try and define how a victim should react to the abuse that they made to them. You're trying to tell someone whom you beat up how to react to the beating. You try to tell someone whom you exclude how you react to the exclusion. Do not talk about it. If I abuse you, it's disloyal for you to scream. You must laugh. If I do certain things to you, you are supposed to just roll over and accept and allow the one who is abusing your rights to do that. That then exacerbates the polarization. What we need is the respect of institutions. We need institutions like the Gender Commission. By the way, they are not government institutions, as my colleague said. These are state institutions that are independent commissions and whose independence is guaranteed in the Constitution and should not be mistaken for government institutions at all. They are neutral arbiters. They must be given that independence to be able to deal with issues that arise in terms of national healing, create legislative framework, deal with violations as they appear, punish the abusers so that we don't get disputed elections, or we are able to agree. Look at what happened in Zambia. The ruling party, of course, at times he almost injected himself with the polaristic ideas, but at the end of the day, he accepted, and that allows a nation to move forward.
You're giving examples. You both gave examples of our neighboring countries. You gave an example of South Africa. You gave an example of Zambia. But now I just want to come to you, Commissioner. Margaret, in terms of what you've heard from the two political parties, in your own opinion, what is really dividing us as Zimbabweans?
I think what is dividing us is that we are failing to acknowledge that we are all different. And being all different doesn't mean that we have to differ. I think what Jacob has just said, examples that he gave, I was just going to translate them to the gender dimension. He talked about equal access to the media, equal access to the resources, equal access to opportunities, which is not happening between men and women. But you find, and the people who make the decisions in the political parties in government, they are men. They are the ones who make decisions. Women are recipients of those decisions. And it is the same to say, this is the ruling party and this is the opposition. And we are saying that the ruling party should actually extend to the opposition. But men are not doing that to women. Women have been disadvantaged for a long time. Even when our constitution says 50-50, you find that it will never happen. When boards are appointed, they are appointed with impunity. It's like the constitution doesn't exist. So the polarization is not only between government, the ruling party, and the opposition. It's also between men and women. So we have to realize, to recognize some of those. And we find that in terms of peace building, if we are going to resolve this issue of polarization, we cannot resolve it if we exclude 52% of the population. Women have a way of resolving conflict which is different from men. Men are quick at trying to fight, but women have a way. And if we include women, and women are also on top, we might find that this problem of polarization might actually go away. I was just going to say, if we are going to achieve peace, there's positive peace and there's negative peace. Positive peace is Rugare and negative peace is Runyararo. We can achieve Runyararo and we think we have achieved everything. We have achieved peace between the opposition and government. But we haven't achieved Rugare because it's negative peace. There's other exclusion of other people who are supposed to be included.
Women play an important role, like what Margaret has just said. Within ZANU-PF, what are you doing to make sure that there is no polarization between men and women?
Thank you all very much. I was going to be very worried if that question had not been answered, because it appears a lot of people want people to speak for the ruling party. Just as a matter of correction and for the record, Madam Chairperson, decisions in ZANU-PF are not made on gender lines. Decisions in ZANU-PF are not made on sexist lines. We are not a sexist organization. We are not an organization that is not gender sensitive. In any case, let me hasten to point out that within ZANU-PF, you might need to know that the presidium of ZANU-PF, from the women's side, we have Maim Chingul, who is the national chairperson of the party. And in the central committee of ZANU-PF, which is one of the party's highest decision-making organs, and the secretariat, which is the Politburo, we have women and men in almost equal measure. I thought I should make that clarification very clear. The same also goes to the party structures from the grassroots to the top. But then here is what happens. I'm trying to say these figures should not then make us make a general comment or a general assessment to say because the number of women in a DCC or in a provincial structure is small, therefore the party is polarized along gender lines. It is because political belonging or membership is a voluntary process. So we would not then say, we know that probably the party's majority of supporters and voters are women and the youth. But amongst them are so many that do not want to take up political positions because probably they are in business, they are in religion, they are in other things that take their time. It is therefore wrong to start scanning political parties in that context. But I would hasten to point out and acknowledge that indeed, like I said, polarization is a choice that we make as individuals. It is wrong to feel that the behavior in one political party, we saw instances like at the burial of Morgan, the late Morgan Tsvangirai. I'm sure you know the instances where Madame Coupe was almost assaulted within a hut. Those are instances I think that we should refer to. We also had those other instances during the elections where some women had, were emasculated from primary elections in other political parties, including in us, ZANU-PF. We acknowledge those things.
The good thing
we
is
feel those things need to be dealt with.
Jacob is here, and he is from the MDC Alliance. So Jacob, I'll pose exactly the same question in terms of gender equality and polarization thereof. Yes, what is your position as a party?
As a party in our constitution, we have the 50-50 principle. I will admit that it is a goal that we need to attain, and we are working towards it. I would not be hypocritical here and say that we have achieved it. We have not, but we are working towards it. As a party, our president, Advocate Nelson Chamisa, appointed a gender task force, a gender commission, which is headed by our vice president, Madame Honorable Lynette Kore, which then deals with looking at all our structures and liaises with gender commission and other constitutional structures, and also our structure to examine the issue of women representation within the party, to examine the issue of trying to encourage more women candidates in terms of parliamentary, not just at proportional, to also infuse young women and put them in there. Yes, the leadership of women is there. Yes, they are trying, but you know, famously when women participate in politics, because of that polarization, you know, the famous trio, those are young women who are trying to be political, but they become victimized, they become polarized, and you know, it's a very difficult environment for women, and it becomes very toxic. If you remember, we had a vice president at one time called Mai Joyce Mujuru, who was hounded viciously by one party and other lady.
It's a good thing that we've got the Gender Commission to respond to some of what you're saying. Yes. So let's hear from Margaret. You've heard what ZANU-PF has said. You've heard what MDC Alliance has said in terms of polarization along gender lines. What is your take?
I think it is very clear. I think we cannot hide behind anything. I think it is very clear that we don't have gender equality. If there was gender equality in Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwe Gender Commission would not have been formed. The reason why the Zimbabwe Gender Commission was formed was the realization that women continue to be marginalized. And the numbers don't lie. We have numbers in parliament, in the Senate, in local councils. We have numbers to say how many women are there and how many men are there. Even in boards, we have all the statistics. So we cannot say that we have achieved gender equality. We are still far away from gender equality. We have been trying to push for proportional representation because we feel that with first past the post, maybe we may not be able to achieve gender equality. So I think we cannot hide. I think that polarization is there, it's real. Patriarchy is there. We cannot run away from patriarchy. Our society is patriarchal. And it's not only Zimbabwe. It's not even only in Zimbabwe. It's worldwide, including even in developed countries like America. There's gender inequality. And women have been marginalized for a long time. And we all know the statistics are there. They speak for themselves. So I think what we should do is to say, what should we do? Because our constitution is also very clear. It says 50-50. But we have not gotten anywhere near 50-50. So this is an issue that we need to address if we are going to be able to eliminate polarization completely.
And then Tafadzwa has got something to you. You're raising your hand as Margaret was speaking. So I'll allow you 15 seconds before I come to you, Albert.
Well, thank you. I think the mistake that we are making here is that we have little time to understand each other properly. There are two things that are being raised here which are of a different character altogether. There is now the issue of gender equality versus the issue of decision making. What I contested from Margaret, Honorable Chairperson, was that decisions in political parties, the ruling party, are made on gender lines or sexist lines or by men. That's what I disputed. I didn't say there is equal representation at every level in terms of the party, for reasons that are very clear, and that is why as ZANU-PF, through our MPs and through the generosity and good observation of the leadership of the party, the president, we supported strongly amendment number 2, which seeks to extend the number of women in parliament, to especially those that came through proportional representation, to extend their tenure so that we get more women elected on this coming election and increase the number. Those are deliberate actions that we are taking. But what I contested was that we make decisions on gender lines or we make decisions from a male perspective. That is not what we stand for in ZANU-PF. But we have taken measures to ensure that more women join the party, the ranks and file, and have the courage to rise within the rank and file of the party.
Thank you very much for your response. And of course, this is a dialogue series. So we've got 4 more episodes to discuss some of these issues which are arising. But now coming to you, Orbit, some critics or some quarters are saying that polarization is emanating from past hurts. For example, the Kukura Hundi issue. What are you doing as the NPRC to make sure that such issues are addressed?
Owen, we are doing a lot. The good thing about the NPRC, we wear a straight jacket because we are mothered and fathered by the Constitution. That's why I'm saying I keep on referring to Section 252 of the Constitution, which is actually very clear to say one of the key functions of the NPRC is to look at post-conflict justice, healing and reconciliation. If I remember well, I think it's actually the very first task that is itemized in Section 252 of the Constitution, just showing how important the issue of post-conflict justice. It doesn't end there. Healing doesn't end there, and reconciliation. You're talking of post-conflict justice, you're talking of healing, and then you're talking of reconciliation. Once we achieve that, then we'll have peace. But the good thing about peace is enduring. Once we get to a stage where as a country we have achieved peace, you find that it will feed into a lot of issues, even what Commissioner Sangarwe has been saying, issue of gender equity and gender equality. Once there is peace, there will be no issue really to say, okay, there is a board of 10 people to be appointed. It's obvious there has to be 5 men and 5 women. People will not even have to, it will just happen on its own because there is peace. But if there is no peace, that's why we then have to go back to the issue of post-conflict, just past hurts. There is need for post-conflict justice. There's need for post-conflict healing. There's need for post-conflict reconciliation. So it's an ongoing process. I'm happy that as Zimbabweans, like right now we are talking. And I'm actually happy with the very convivial atmosphere in this studio right now, Owen. I think it speaks to an attempt to build peace. We are getting there. We may not get there now or tomorrow or next week, but I'm sure if we maintain this level of respect for different views, political views, even religious views, then I'm sure we'll get there. Of course, it'll be difficult because we are talking of a country which is 41 years old. We are fairly young, but I believe that that should not be an excuse for us to not to build peace because we are young. Because I believe that as Zimbabweans, we are people who, all things being equal, we are people who can be able to be tolerant, who can be able to answer your question, to be able to address past hurts, who can be able to heal, help each other heal, who can be able to then help each other reconcile.
And that's the whole purpose of this dialogue series. Now I'll come to you, Jacob. You've been very quiet. Well, not
because you.
Yes,
Yes.
But as
He had 15
Orbit,
seconds.
as Orbit was saying, in terms of past hurts, you as the opposition party, what are you doing? What role are you playing to make sure that there is reconciliation, like what he said, there is healing as well?
Well, we have engaged in dialogue. We have called for dialogue. We have said you need to dialogue with us because we have the majority of the victims. We have the people and the names of the people who have been killed just because they've been MDC. We have the people that have been maimed, that have been tortured, that have lost property, that have lost jobs, that have lost a lot of things because we are MDC. So we have put that on the table and say that we need a proper reconciliation. We need a redress of those past harm. We need to do away with impunity. We need to deal with the structural causes and the people who caused it. It's very damaging for the community to know that the person who tortured you or who killed your relative is still walking scot-free without a justice of any sort being done in the very same community. And this allows a blanket of terror to be in the communities and a blanket of fear to blanket national processes when we need to do that. And it also goes to gender. The gender discussion from the Honorable Chair reminded me one thing. At one point, the Permanent Secretary for Women Affairs was a man. Is he still a man? Mm-hmm. It's still a man. Can you imagine how this polarization happens? The Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Women Affairs is a man. How does that happen? So it is that blindness to obvious transgressions that fits our society that allows us not to go forward. It's like, if you watch TikTok, you've looked at conferences for women in certain Arab states, you'll see that the conference for women was made up of men. The secretary, Permanent Secretary for Women Affairs is a man. It's ridiculous. But anyway, what we need to deal with when we need to do national healing is to be able to look at what have been the causes, how do we do redress, how do we make sure that it never happens again, and we move forward as society and we move forward as a people towards depolarization.
And as ZANU-PF, as the ZANU-PF-led government, what are you doing to address some of these issues to make sure that we move forward?
Thank you very much. I think I just want that question then makes me refer to very interesting about polarizing instances, which I keep referring to my earlier point that polarization is a choice. There appears to be some organizations found both in the civil society and the political sphere who have become addicted to polarization such that, hardly can you think about extricating them from that. I'll tell you this instant, with I said at my codex, with elections in 2018, what happens is that barely 48 hours after voting, an opposition party is running amok in the streets. You still believe in buying young people beer, liquor, cigarettes, and drugs to cause violence in the city that you saw on 1 August. 48 hours after voting, and people are saying they are doing that for the cause of wanting results released. You can imagine how interesting it is.
But that then what are you as ZANU-PF doing to address these issues?
Listen, you'll then probably get the point that I'm trying to make here. This is a deliberate choice taken at a leadership level in some political organization. Look, the president gets inaugurated, they take their issues to the courts. They cannot acknowledge that they've lost their case at the courts and the nation needs to move on. They'll still continue. The government of today is illegitimate and that they are the rightful presidents. Thirdly, they move on to say we are going to pour Jecha in all the developmental efforts that the government will be taking to ensure that this government either doesn't get a cent or move forward. And just recently you had their vice president Mr. Tendebit writing to the IMF that don't give Zimbabwe money.
I'll let you respond,
Yes.
Jacob. I'll let
Don't
you respond.
give
No, well,
Zimbabwe
the question was, what is this government
financial
doing?
assistance.
Let him finish.
You see
and
what
then
I'm
I'll let you
talking about?
respond.
Okay.
Don't hide behind your finger. Don't give this. This is Mr. Bit writing a letter that is in the public
And
domain.
let's get to answer the
Exactly.
question. In the interest of time, let's get to answer the question.
I know you like talking about us, but talk about yourself.
I'm the most interested. Can I be protected?
Yes,
please?
please go
Okay.
ahead and
Thank you
we've
very
got a
much.
few minutes left. Please go ahead and finish off.
And talk about yourself.
Thank you, Jacob. We will let him finish, and then I'll get back to you to respond. Thank you. Go ahead.
I think there are serious evidence of individual polarization that I said earlier. It's self-revealing anyway. The public be the judge. But I say, they write that letter that this government, your government, yourselves, our people, all of us do not realize these developmental efforts that we're earmarking because they need to be in power. They swear themselves, all those things. I've raised these things to you to tell you that there is probably very minimum that we should be doing to address the polarization, the choice to be polarized that some colleagues in the political sphere have taken. To the extent that it is one thing to take a donkey to the river, it is another thing to force it to drink water. Once we do that, we'll be crossing the line of the Constitution because we respect their rights to be who they choose to be. But what we know is that Zimbabweans are fast abandoning them with the toxic politics that is associated with them. The toxic politics of calling for sanctions, the toxic politics of refusing to acknowledge this is a legitimate government, but when it is opportune, vanopuwa ma red passports, ma diplomatic passports, vachitora ma MP, zvichizabvawo government. The government that is illegitimate according to them, they take vehicles, they say these vehicles are coming from this government, but according to them, a government that is not legitimate. Barely a few minutes when we entered in, he told Minister Mtulingu, please consider us on the issue of what I said. You are a good mayor. You now know the issues. But I cautioned him, Minister, when it is convenient, but when we are on this platform, illegitimate government. That's why I'm saying when people are not truthful, honest, and clear, it is very difficult to work with them, and that remains their challenge. Those who want to work for the development of this country will abandon toxic politics, and we have seen them. There's no need to recreate.
Well, Jacob,
politics.
there we go. Critics say you're contributing to polarization by maybe fronting what is termed foreign interests, like what he has been saying. Your take, your response to Tafazo.
There is no foreign interest when we say our people need jobs. There is no foreign interest when we say our people need food. There is no foreign interest when we say our people need a better living. There is no foreign interest when we say our people need transport. There is no foreign interest when we say our people deserve to live well. When we say teachers deserve to get pay. You saw the pension of a teacher. The pension of a teacher after working 41 years is a sum total of $400 under their government. And there is no foreign interest in saying that a teacher must be paid well. There is no foreign interest in saying that a nurse and a doctor must be paid well. It is in the interest of Zimbabweans to live well. It is in the interest of Zimbabweans to have jobs. It is in the interest of Zimbabweans to have a better life for their children, education. And when someone leaves school, they want to be employed. They want to go to a good school. And what is foreign about that? What is foreign about wanting to live well in your own country? That is all we have aspired to as the MDC, and that is what we seek to provide. And
well, maybe the polarization is coming in terms of what he is saying, and other critics as well. They're saying in terms of the sanctions.
well,
your take.
We saw what's his name before he passed away. Sibusisi Omoyo. He put in a policy of re-engagement in their policy framework, and that re-engagement is about bilateral relations between themselves and other countries. He put in steps. He put in. They were put in steps that they had to do. They had to free the media, which they promised to do. They had to stop violence, which they promised to do. They had to give equal opportunity to democracy, which they promised to do. They had to do the rule of law, which they promised to do. Where are they in terms of complying with the things that they need to do? We cannot be put in the middle of something that his government promised to do. And if they follow the re-engagement policy as put by their predecessor of the current Foreign Affairs Minister, they will be able to re-engage with the international community. They pulled the whole country unilaterally out of the Commonwealth. They made a decision. We never said we wanted to pull out of the Commonwealth. They pulled out on their own. They have to rejoin on their own.
It's very unfortunate that our time is faster running out.
Okay.
So there you have it. Your work is cut out. NPRC, Orbit Kutu. The polarization is there. Is depolarization a utopian idea? Will we ever achieve unity here in Zimbabwe?
Yes, Owen, we will be able to achieve unity, peace and stability in our lifetime. I think it's within striking range. As NPRC, we are working flat out with all key stakeholders, like I said a few minutes ago. And the good thing about stakeholder engagement is to say that everyone, like I said earlier again, referring to Vice President Ngomo, may his departed soul rest in peace, to say everyone is a player. Everyone is a player in achieving peace. Everyone is a player in achieving tolerance. Everyone is a player in depolarizing. That's why I'm a little bit reluctant to just confine it to political polarization, because when you look at polarization, I want to look at it, I want to give it a global impact. To say, if you are polarized, you can be polarized in your house. If you and your wife are not talking, properly, you're not exchanging words politely, that's polarization. You and your children are not being tolerant to each other, you are polarized. So let's look at polarization in a broader sense, because this polarization, which then looks at itself or manifests itself politically, it actually emanates from micro spaces of polarization, domestic polarization, even polarization at the workplace, polarization within political parties, polarization everywhere. Then it then explodes onto the political space. So I believe that as NPRC, like you rightly point out, Owen, our work is cut out, but I'm excited because the stakeholders that we're engaging, all of them are enthusiastic to say, let's look at this issue of political polarization. Let's address it together. So we are confident as NPRC that we're getting there.
And that's a great start. But as we round off, I'll give each of our panelists exactly a minute to give their closing submissions. And I'll start with the political actors. I'll start with you, Jacob.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I think we need to come to a framework where we understand multi-party democracy, where people must engage with the people that they are different to, that they differ with. It is not, engagement is not a praise and worship session where you engage with people who are willing to praise you. You deal with the one whom you feel has wronged you. Us as a party, through our president, Advocate Nelson Chamisa, we are committed to a diverse and united nation. We are committed to a nation that speaks to each other, that reduces the levels of toxicity, that is able to walk hand in hand towards a prosperous Zimbabwe.
There you go. Your minute is up. Tafazo.
It appears my colleagues have invested so much in disagreeing with us so that it becomes a possible yardstick of getting engaged. The country doesn't work that way. Let me just rush to point out that if our colleagues had somewhere to take lessons, Zambia is not so distant from us, and I'm sure their guys, their leadership smuggled themselves there for some selfies, and we saw them. But all that I just want to say is that if they were to take lessons from President of the Republic of Zambia, the new President Hichilema Hakainde, he lost 6 times, I think 5 or 6 times, yes, trying to become president. All the accusations that Zimbabwe is being accused of today have been used as a yardstick to measure or punish an African country or an undesirable sitting government. Zambia's successful governments have been accused of the same so-called human rights, so-called corruption, so-called accountability. But in his journey to become president, that man never called for calamity against his people or Zambians, or called for sanctions or punishment or international isolation against Zambia. He remained true, glued to national fundamental interests of Zambia. And remember, Now he's president, the people gave him a vote of confidence. They should take a leave. You don't get your country punished so that you feel you can become
And
president.
your minute is up.
Thank you.
The lesson is
Margaret.
overpower.
Margaret, your closing remarks.
My closing remarks is to answer your question whether we can ever depolarize, and my answer is yes, we can depolarize. I think what we need to depolarize is in negotiations. When you are on a negotiating table, for the negotiations to succeed, each party to the negotiations is to feel that they have something to gain by coming together, or that they have something to lose by remaining alone. So I think we have Rwanda as an example. I think they went through worse than what we did in terms of genocide, but you go to Rwanda now, there's so much unity, there's so much development. So Zimbabwe can do it as long as we are willing partners. We have to be willing to come together. And we are one people, we should be able to come together.
Thank you very much for your closing remarks, Margaret, and of course, Audit, your closing remarks in just a minute.
I would say as NPRC, we are simply saying we as Zimbabweans should be united. And by being united, it doesn't mean that we are homogeneous. We should be able to be tolerant of different perspectives. And I'm reluctant to say just political perspectives, because you find that polarization manifests itself, like I said earlier, globally. If we are just appreciative of ourselves as a diverse people, that there is unity in diversity. I think this is what the NPRC has been busy saying from the time it was formed, and this is now the second commission, mind you. It's a time-bound commission. It will just exist for the next 10 years. To say, as the NPRC, we are calling out to all of us, not only political players, all of us in our various spaces, to say, let's come together and build peace. Everyone is a peace builder in their own right.
And on that note, many thanks to our guests for joining us on this second edition of the Peace and Social Cohesion Dialogue series, brought to you by ZTN in partnership with Heal Zimbabwe Trust. Now, tonight's dialogue was political polarization. Has Zimbabwe found the remedy? Let's continue the conversation on our social media platforms: Twitter at ZTN News, YouTube at ZTN, Facebook at Zimpapers TV. I'm Owen Kaura. Thank you very much for watching.